Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about a CNN panel absolutely melting down over the fact that one of the panelists brought up the Furgeson effect and the George Floyd effect, which these people pretended never was mentioned before in the history of ever. And considering I have been in a position where I brought up these two things and gotten the same exact reaction, I find this to be absolutely hilarious. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And remind you that on Wednesday, October 23rd, I will be live in person in Lower Manhattan debating Joshua Eagle on the idea that libertarians should vote for Kamala Harris over any other candidate in this election. It's going to be an absolutely wonderful event. It's free to attend. Just click the registration link in the top of this description. And please, I hope to see you there if you can make it.
Just yesterday, Ryan, about how in the context of riots, he was saying, let's just bring the military into it to deal with American citizens. I mean, that happened yesterday.
Right, but the post-George Floyd riots resulted in an excess of over 15,000 black male deaths in this country.
So first things first, I want you guys to understand who's bringing this up on this particular panel. This is a man called Ryan Girdusky. He's somebody that I've actually spoken to on multiple occasions via Twitter Space. He's the author of a book called They're Not Listening, which, by the way, covers immigration policy and how the elites, not just in this country, but across the Western world, ignore their populations when it comes to this issue. And it's absolutely a fascinating read, and I recommend you either get the book or you get it on Audible. And again, full disclosure, I really do like this person, but in addition to that, he is also somebody who goes around the country flipping school board elections with his organization, and he does an absolutely stellar job in that regard. He's putting in the work on the local level to push for the change that we need in this country. So this guy is of a top tier grade in terms of activism and doing the work in terms of politics in this country, and everybody should follow him on Twitter and give him the respect that is due, or give him the flowers, as is a popular saying for some reason on the internet.com, that he is owed. That being said, notice how he brings up the George Floyd effect and the Furgeson effect, well-documented phenomena, and then all of a sudden, the panelists on CNN are like, whoa, how could you talk about how this anti-police sentiment ended up leading to spikes in violent crime and 15,000 excess black male deaths? What are you even talking about, you crazy person?
How?
Yeah.
The surge of violent crime, it was like Ferguson, the Ferguson effect and the Floyd effect.
Respectfully, you got to explain to me how George Floyd's death.
Yeah.
Because I need causation here.
Yes,
because
what happens is after the Ferguson riot and after the Floyd riot, policemen, in fear of their jobs many times and political coverage, pull back from their jobs, resulting in an increased level of homicide.
I got to stop you there.
So these CNN panelists are embarrassing and stupid from top to bottom, because what Ryan is bringing up, what he is saying, is 100% true, 100% fact-based, and again, has even been covered, as tweeted out by Ryan, on CNN itself. The Furgeson effect, as described by FBI Director James Comey back in the day when he was actually writing articles about this particular thing. So you gotta love the brain dead response where they're like, Ryan, what are you talking about? You're making a connection that just doesn't possibly exist. Nobody's ever thought of this. And as somebody who's experienced this when I interacted with the Majority Report, I'm not surprised to see the left go into full denial mode and pretend that anybody who brings up this well-known and well-documented phenomena is making it up on the spot. Again, this quite literally happened to me, where these people were like, oh, the George Floyd effect? What even is that?
But just to reference our buddy, the actual Justice Warrior, it doesn't say the post-George Floyd effect trend. It says the post-pandemic trend.
Right.
So, like, it's fucking embarrassing, frankly, and I'll just say it, Anna retweets that guy. It's fucking embarrassing.
So let's be 100% clear about this. The Ferguson effect, the George Floyd effect, the Black Lives Matter effect as a whole is 100% well documented, supported by the facts, and one of the best examples of this is neither the Ferguson effect nor the George Floyd effect, but it's actually the Freddie Gray effect in Baltimore, because after the death of Freddie Gray, Baltimore saw 8+ years of homicide elevated, and one of the reasons why is because Marilyn Mosby, the woke district attorney who sided with the Black Lives Matter rioters in that particular case, decided that she was going to base her whole administration about attacking the cops and making them into criminals, despite the fact that all of her cases fell apart. So unsurprisingly, when you have a politician that is in office with these values, that is advocating for Black Lives Matter, the organization, you see a dramatic spike in homicides. And it ran throughout the whole course of time that she was in office, but all of a sudden when Ivan Bates comes into office, when he decides that the prosecution's office is actually going to prosecute criminals rather than target the police, homicide dropped down dramatically. And in George Floyd effect, we saw a 30% increase in homicide year over year, which is the greatest increase of all time. This started at the end of May of 2020 when Floyd died and the Black Lives Matter rioters kicked off. And the reason why is because policing was pulled back in order to cater to the demands of the anti-police, anti-law enforcement Black Lives Matter rioters. And this has continued throughout this country, and we still have elevated levels of homicides in comparison to where they were pre-Black Lives Matter.
Hold on,
you can look at the Washington Post
Ryan, we got to
numbers on
stop you
this.
there because you're literally making a connection out of your own conjecture.
No,
You cannot
it's a
just
real
do
thing.
that.
Look up the Ferguson effect. Look up the Floyd effect. It is a real term.
You cannot
It's a
just,
real term.
you
I didn't
cannot
make this
just
up.
invent a connection between two things just because you want that connection to be there.
It's a little like a name. It's a real thing. You can
Doesn't
look
mean
it
it's
up.
right.
I mean, again, look at this insane meltdown right here, where they're like, you can't just make this up. And Ryan is in the position that I've been in, where he's like, no, it's a real thing. People mention this, people acknowledge this. You can debate the merits of it, but the idea that I made it up is absurd. And then you have the CNN host say, oh, you can't just make up a connection in your brain the way that you wanted. You have to say, you know what? Coincidentally, crime spiked dramatically post George Floyd, not post the pandemic, not post the lockdowns. In fact, crime was going down up until the death of George Floyd, up until the Black Lives Matter riots. And you just can't make any connection with that. You just have to pretend that this anomaly, a 30% increase in homicide year over year, 47% by the way in New York City, who had Bill de Blasio, who wanted to defund the police, who again was a big advocate for the Black Lives Matter cause, and by the way, record homicides in Minneapolis, the epicenter of George Floyd. You can't just pretend that that is a thing that exists just because it exists and it's represented repeatedly throughout the statistics.
Just because you want that connection to be there.
It's a little like a name. It's a real thing. You
It
can
doesn't
look
mean
it
it's
up.
right.
It could be a right.
Let's
It doesn't mean it's accurate. Yeah.
Let's move on because
Look it up. I'll send you a reading list after the show.
hold on.
So I love the fact that Ryan follows up because you have all these people saying, I've never heard of this. I've never even mentioned this in my entire life. And he says, I'll send you a reading list after the show. And again, Ryan ended up tweeting out CNN articles that were covering this specific effect, this specific hypothesis. And I will add, again, you can disagree with it. You could say, oh, it's not really real. It's not represented in all categories. It's too ill-defined. Whatever you want to add into the equation in order to try to nerf it. But the fact is, these people are so in their own bubble that they don't even realize that this exists. And Ryan, being a smart, sane, sober-minded person, is just hitting them over and over again very subtly, but I absolutely love it.
Hold on. I just want everyone to settle down because people cannot hear at home when everybody's talking at once, okay? Go ahead.
No, I just think there has to be a level of intellectual honesty. And one of the things we can talk about here when we talk about Donald Trump is he's actually somebody who never spoke out about George Floyd's death. And for me, it's kind of personal because as a black man, when you have someone with a knee on their neck for 9 minutes and some change, and you're actually calling out for your mother while you're being suffocated on national TV, and you are a parent and a son and a brother, that goes a long way.
So this is one of the things that I love about the left, is that when they hear countervailing information, almost religiously, they go back to the sacred talking points. The knee on the neck, 9 minutes, suffocated as a black man, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is, that has nothing to do with the George Floyd effect. George Floyd's death, you could think whatever the hell you want about it. I don't really give a damn at this point in time, but the fact of the matter is, the reaction to this has been disastrous for this country. There's a reason why when I cover all these different various stories based on the reforms of George Floyd and the excess deaths that has led to, I ask the question, I pose the question, and yes, it's a provocative question, is it worth it? Have we avenged George Floyd enough? Have enough innocent people died in the name of avenging George Floyd before we realize that this has been a horrible mistake? And the answer, by the way, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, is no, absolutely not. These defund and abolish activists, they're still hanging around. They're still winning small, petty local seats and making big changes that ruin the lives of Americans.
The kind of disingenuity or dishonesty for me is you cannot say that what happened during that time period is to blame for the deaths of other black men due to violence or what have you.
100% happened.
But
So I love this right here because this guy, after he resets the religious narrative of Saint Floyd, who died for our sins, the sins of evil white racism, he says, you can't just blame that and the after effects for the deaths of black men. And Ryan says, no, I 100% can because it's well documented. It is factual. And again, I will pull up charts, whatever you want to see, whatever evidence you want me to present for the George Floyd effect. I got it on hand. And Ryan obviously knows these numbers because he's ready to hit back and he's not going to be scared off by the, oh, as a black man, the knee on the neck, it's so sad, so sad. Therefore, we need to let all these different various people get killed in our country because we need to avenge Saint Floyd. We need to avenge the savior of the United States of America, Mr. George Floyd.
disingenuity or dishonesty for me is you cannot say that what happened during that time period is to blame for the deaths of other black men due to violence or what have you.
100% happened.
But that literally, and my point to you is that makes absolutely no sense. And I would argue to you as somebody that I'm not coming from a perspective where I want fewer police. I don't. I want police actually to be paid more. I just want better police, more qualified police. I want there to be a database where police, if they commit bad acts, they can't just go from one department to another. That's criminal justice reform.
Okay.
But George Floyd didn't cause 15,000.
And here, before you jump in.
So again, he tries to moralize and all that, and he says, oh, but George Floyd didn't cause 15,000 more deaths. And Ryan's ready to hit back immediately, but of course, the host has to interrupt because that's what these CNN panels are really about. Filibustering out the person who's actually telling the truth, who's actually sage and normal and rational based on these issues, and allowing this emotional garbage to go unchallenged as much as possible.
I mean, we should know that we're talking about things that happened when Donald Trump was president.
Right.
He was the president.
But
so how is he not responsible for it?
Well, the president doesn't control local police departments.
Well, okay, but you're trying to blame crime on Joe Biden.
No, I
but
didn't
you don't blame.
I didn't blame
Okay, Republicans
crime
have blamed
on Joe Biden.
crime on Joe Biden, but you cannot. But you're saying that people who died when Donald Trump was president, that's not his fault.
I don't.
I don't agree with either blame being assigned to either president. I think
But I didn't
presidents
blame Joe
don't
Biden.
have a magic wand and they don't control crime from the White House.
Right.
But if you're going to say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are responsible for a rise in crime,
I didn't say that, though.
Don't you have to
I
be
guess
intellectually?
all I
didn't
will say is,
that.
we're talking about what the future is for Black Americans. And what I will say is that Kamala Harris supports the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which, again, I have no idea what you're talking about in terms of connection. I will read it,
Okay.
and then I will fact check the sources
Sure,
that
go
actually
ahead.
wrote the thing. But that's what we're talking about for a plan for Black America, is how we make public safety something so that everyone, black, white, brown, can live in safe communities. That's not what Donald Trump wants. Donald Trump, again, doesn't want a better border, because if he could have had a better border under this president by supporting a bill, and he didn't want to do it.
True at all. That's
He
All right,
did.
guys, we do have to pause there. There's actually a lot more to talk about. We'll continue this conversation and many others coming up next.
So what did I say the goal of this segment actually was? It was to filibuster out Ryan because he was exactly accurate about the George Floyd effect. And again, this is something that I've documented over and over again. You can actually see charts of crime, of homicide. You can see when the pandemic starts. You can see crime actually dropping compared to the previous year. And then post George Floyd, post the Black Lives Matter riots, once we get to late May of 2020, all of a sudden the numbers spike dramatically. This is undeniable. This is so obvious. And I do find it hilarious that they try to filibuster with, oh, well, you can't say Joe Biden's responsible for crime when the Black Lives Matter riots, which, by the way, we totally supported at CNN, was egged on by Democrats. Kamala Harris advocated for bailing out the rioters. You also had a bunch of Democratic politicians refusing to deploy the National Guard because the evil Orange Man supported deploying the National Guard. So they were like, no, let the city burn because Orange Man banned. You can't blame that on Joe Biden when that was under Trump. And by the way, I'm not saying it was either or anything like that, but yeah, you just got to accept that this was either Orange Man's fault or no president's fault. And Ryan says, I never said that. That wasn't the topic. I obviously know what you're doing. And then they cut to this next woman who's like, oh, well, I've never heard this, and I'm going to fact check your sources. I'm gonna read into this, and you could just see the smile creeping in on Ryan's face. And then she tries to pivot to immigration, and Ryan's even happier because the guy wrote a whole book on this particular topic. That's where his expertise really shines through, that and school board elections. And then the segment cuts. Then it's over. Then we can't talk about it anymore because obviously this just got too factual for CNN. So yeah, absolutely wonderful to see on full display. Again, credit where credit is due to Ryan for killing it on this panel, which by the way is something that he does on the regular when he's on CNN. And of course, you know he killed it the absolute most because they essentially tried their damnedest to never let this man speak again, to emotionally whine about the knee on the neck and all this stuff that made them feel oh so sad and oh my god, it's so sad, it's so terrible. Let us distract the absolute most from this, while also kind of implying that Ryan's an evil white racist for knowing facts. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. That's what I thought about this particular appearance. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. Follow Ryan, by the way. Till next time.